The Hare Who Thought the World Had Come to an End. Translated by H. N. Francis. Once upon a time there was near the western ocean a grove of palm and velvet trees. A certain hare lived here beneath a palm sapling at the foot of a velvet tree. One day this hare, after feeding, came and lay down beneath a young palm tree, and the thought struck him, if this earth should be destroyed, what would become of me? At this very moment a ripe velvet fruit fell on a palm leaf. At the sound of it, the hare suddenly thought, this solid earth is collapsing, and starting up, he fled without so much as looking behind him. Another hare saw him scampering off, as if frightened to death, and asked the cause of his sudden flight. "Pray don't ask me," he said. The second hare followed, crying, "Pray, sir, what is it?" and kept running after him. Then the hare stopped a moment, and, without looking back, he said, "The earth here is breaking up." And at this the second hare ran after the first, and then first one and then another hare caught sight of him running and joined in the chase, till 100,000 hares all took their flight together. They were seen by a deer, a boar, an elk, a buffalo, a wild ox, a rhinoceros, a tiger, a lion, and an elephant. And when they asked what it meant, and were told that the earth was breaking up, they too took to flight. By degrees this host of animals was a league long. A wise Brahmin, who saw this headlong flight of animals, and was told that the cause of it was that the earth was coming to an end, thought, the earth is nowhere coming to an end. Surely it must be some sound which was misunderstood by them. If I don't make a great effort, they will all perish. I will save their lives. With the speed of a lion, he got before them to the foot of a mountain, and roared 3 times like a lion. They were terribly frightened, and stopped in their flight, standing all huddled together. The Brahmin, in the guise of a lion, went amongst them and asked why they were running away. "The earth is collapsing," they answered. "Who saw it collapsing?" he said. "The elephants know all about it," they replied. He asked the elephants, but they didn't know. They said the lion knew. But the lion said, "We don't know, the tigers know." The tigers said, "The wild oxen know." The wild oxen, the buffaloes. The buffaloes, the elks. The elks, the boars. The boars, the deer. The deer said, "We don't know, the hares know." When the hares were questioned, they pointed to one particular hare, and said, "This one told us." So the Brahmin went up to him and asked, "Is it true, sir, that the earth is breaking up?" "Yes, sir, I saw it," said the hare. "Where," he asked, "were you living when you saw it?" "Near the ocean, sir, in a grove of palm and velvet trees. As I was lying beneath the shade of a palm sapling at the foot of a velvet tree, I thought, if this earth should break up, where shall I go? And at that very moment I heard the sound of the earth breaking up, and I fled." The lion thought to himself, a ripe velvet fruit evidently must have fallen on a palm leaf and made a thud, and this hare jumped to the conclusion that the earth was coming to an end, and ran away. I will find out the exact truth about it. So he reassured the herd of animals and said, "I will take the hare and go and find out exactly whether the earth is coming to an end or not, in the place pointed out by him. Until I return, do you stay here." Then, placing the hare on his back, he sprang forward with the speed of a lion, and putting the hare down in a palm grove, he said, "Come, show us the place you meant." "I dare not, my lord," said the hare. "Come, don't be afraid," said the lion. The hare, not daring to go near the velvet tree, stood afar off and cried, "Yonder, sir, is the place of dreadful sounds." The lion went to the foot of the velvet tree, and saw the spot where the hare had been lying beneath the shade of the palm tree, and the ripe velva fruit that fell on the palm leaf. And having ascertained that the earth had not broken up, he placed the hare on his back, and with the speed of a lion soon came again to the herd of beasts. He told them the whole story, and having thus reassured the herd of beasts, he let them go. End of Chapter 10, Part 1. The Watering of the Saplings, translated by Rev. W. H. D. Rouse. Once upon a time, a king named Visasena was reigning over the city of Benares, and proclamation was made of a holiday. The park keeper thought he would take a holiday, so calling the monkeys that lived in the park, he said, "This park is a great blessing to you. I want to take a week's holiday. Will you water the saplings on the 7th day?" "Oh, yes," they said. He gave them the watering skins and went away. The monkeys drew water and began to water the roots, when the eldest monkey cried out, "Wait, now! It's hard to get water. We must not waste it. Let us pull up the plants and notice the length of their roots. If they have long roots, they need plenty of water, but short ones need but a little." "True, true," they agreed. So some of them pulled up the plants, while others put them back and watered them. "Who bid you do that?" asked a young gentleman living in Benares. "Our chief," they replied. To this the young gentleman answered, "If he was chosen as the best, what sort of creatures are the rest?" Whereat the monkeys repeated, "Brahmin, you know not what you say, blaming us in such a way. If the root we do not know, how can we tell the trees that grow?" End of Chapter 10, Part 2. The Old Hare and the Elephants, translated by Sir Edwin Arnold. Once on a time very little rain had fallen in the dew season, and the elephants, being oppressed with thirst, thus addressed their leader, "Master, how are we to live? The small creatures find something to wash in, but we cannot, and we are half dead in consequence. Whither shall we go then, and what shall we do?" Upon that the king of the elephants led them away a little distance, and showed them a beautiful pool of water clear as crystal, where they took their ease. Now it chanced that a company of hares resided on the banks of the pool, and the going and the coming of the elephants trampled many of them to death, till one of their number grumbled out, "This troop will be coming here to water every day, and every one of our family will be crushed." "Do not disquiet yourself," said an old buck hare named Goodspeed. "I will manage to stop it." And so saying, he set off bethinking himself on his way how he should approach and accost a herd of elephants. For elephants destroy by touching, snakes with point of tooth beguile, kings by favor kill, and traitors murder with a fatal smile. "I will get on the top of a hill," he thought, "and address the elephants from there." This being done, and the lord of the herd perceiving him, It was asked of the Hare, "Who art thou, and whence comest thou?" "I am an ambassador from his godship the Moon," replied Goodspeed. "State your business," said the Elephant King. "Sire," began the Hare, "an ambassador speaks the truth safely by reason of his position. Thus saith the Moon, then: These hares were the guardians of my pool, and thine elephants in coming here have scared them away. This is not well. Am I not Asanka, whose banner bears a hare, and are not these hares my followers?" "Please your worship," said the Elephant King with much fear, "we knew nothing of this. We will go there no more." "It were well," said the make-believe ambassador, "that you first make your apologies to the god, who is quaking with rage in his pool, and then went about your business." "We will do so," replied the elephant with meekness, and being led by night to the pool, in the ripples of which the image of the Moon was quivering, the herd made their prostrations, the Hare explaining to the Moon that their fault was committed in ignorance, and therefore they got their dismissal. End of Chapter 10, Part 3. The Elephant Has a Bet with the Tiger, by Walter Skeat. MRASFAI. In the beginning, Gaja the elephant and Rimo the tiger were sworn friends. But one day they came to a clearing and presently encountered Lobong the long-tailed spectacled monkey. And when he saw the monkey, the elephant said, "Mr. Lobong, yonder is far too noisy. Let us try and shake him off. If he falls to me, I am to eat you, and if he falls to you, you are to eat me. We will make a wager of it." The tiger said, "Agreed," and the elephant replied, "Agreed." "Very well," said the tiger, "you shall try and menace him first." So the elephant tried to menace the monkey. "Ow, ow, ow," he trumpeted, and each time he trumpeted the monkey was scared. But the monkey went jumping head foremost through the branches and never fell to the ground at all. Presently, therefore, the tiger asked the elephant, "Well, friend elephant, would you like to try your luck again?" But the elephant said, "No, thank you. It shall be your turn now, and if he falls to you, you shall eat me, if you really can make him fall." Then the tiger went and roared his longest and loudest, and shortened his body as for a spring, and growled and menaced the monkey thrice. And the monkey leaped and fell at the tiger's feet, for his feet and hands were paralyzed, and would not grip the branches any more. Then the tiger said, "Well, friend elephant, I suppose I may eat you now." But the elephant said, "You have, I admit, won the wager, but I beg you to grant me just 7 days' respite to enable me to visit my wife and children and to make my will." The tiger granted the request, and the elephant went home, bellowing and sobbing every foot of the way. Now the elephant's wife heard the sound of her husband's voice, and said to her children, "What can be the matter with your father that he keeps sobbing so?" And the children listened to make sure, and said, "Yes, it really is father's voice, the sobbing, and not that of anybody else." Presently Father Elephant arrived, and Mother Elephant asked, "What were you sobbing for, father? What have you done to yourself?" Father Elephant replied, "I made a wager with friend Tiger about shaking down a monkey, and friend Tiger beat me. I menaced the monkey, but he did not fall. If he had fallen to me, I was to have eaten friend Tiger. But if he fell to friend Tiger was to eat me. I was beaten, and now friend Tiger says he's going to eat me. So I begged leave to come home and see you, and he has given me just 7 days' respite." Now for the 7 days Father Elephant kept sobbing aloud, and neither ate nor slept, and the thing came to the hearing of friend Mouse Deer. "What can be the matter with friend Elephant, that he keeps bellowing and bellowing? Neither does he sleep, so that night is turned into day, and day into night. What on earth is the matter with him? Suppose I go and see," said the Mouse Deer. Then the Mouse Deer went to see what was wrong, and asked, "What is the matter with you, friend Elephant, that we hear you bellowing and bellowing every single day, and every single night? Just now, too, when the rams are upon us. You are far too noisy." But the Elephant said, "It is no mere empty noise, friend Mouse Deer. I have got into a dreadful scrape." "What sort of a scrape?" inquired the Mouse Deer. "I made a wager with friend Tiger about shaking down a monkey, and he beat me." "What was the stake?" asked the Mouse Deer. "The stake was that friend Tiger might eat me if friend Tiger frightened it down, and if I frightened it down, I might eat friend Tiger. It fell to friend Tiger, and now friend Tiger wants to eat me. And my reason for not eating or sleeping any more is that I have got only just 7 days' respite to go home and visit my wife and children, and to make my will." Then the Mouse Deer said, "If it came to friend Tiger's eating you, I should feel exceedingly sorrowful, exceedingly distressed. But things being only as you say, I feel neither. If you will assist me, I will become your slave, and my descendant shall be your slaves forever." "Very well. If that is the case, I will assist you," said the Mouse Deer. "Go and look for a jar full of molasses." Friend Elephant promised to do so, and went to look for it at the house of a maker of palm wine. The owner of the house fled for his life, and the jar fell into friend Elephant's possession, who bore it back to the Mouse Deer. Then friend Mouse Deer said, "When does your promise expire?" And friend Elephant replied, "Tomorrow." So when next morning arrived, they started, and the Mouse Deer said, "Now pour the molasses over your back, and let it spread and run down your legs." Friend Elephant did as he was ordered. Friend Mouse Deer then instructed the Elephant as follows: "As soon as I begin to lick up the molasses on your back, bellow as loud as you can, and make believe to be hurt, and writhe and wriggle this way and that." And presently friend Mouse Deer commenced to lick hard, and friend Elephant writhed and wriggled, and made believe to be hurt, and made a prodigious noise of trumpeting. In this way they proceeded, and friend Mouse Deer got up and sat astride upon friend Elephant's back, and the Elephant trumpeted and trumpeted all the way till they met with friend Tiger. At this, friend Mouse Deer exclaimed, "A single elephant is very short commons. If I could only catch that big and fat old tiger there, it would be just enough to satisfy my hunger." Now, when friend Tiger heard these words of the Mouse Deer, he said to himself, "So, I suppose if you catch me, you'll eat me into the bargain, will you?" And friend Tiger stayed not a moment longer, but fled for his life, fetching very lofty bounds, and soon he met with a black ape, and friend Ape asked, "Why running so hard, friend Tiger? Why so much noise? And why, just when the rams are upon us, too, do you go fetching such lofty bounds?" Friend Tiger replied, "What do you mean by so much noise? What was the thing that was got upon Friend Elephant's back, that had caught Friend Elephant, and was devouring him so that he went writhing and wriggling for the pain of it, and the blood went streaming down in floods. Moreover, the thing that was on Friend Elephant's back said, to my hearing, that a single elephant was very short commons, but if it could catch a fat old tiger like myself, that would be just enough to satisfy its hunger. Friend Ape said, "What was that thing, Friend Tiger?" "I don't know," said the tiger. "Ah," mused the ape, "I wonder if it could be Friend Mouse Deer." "Certainly not," said the tiger. "Why, how in the world could Friend Mouse Deer swallow me? To say nothing of his not being used to meat food," said he. "Come, and let us go back again." Then they went back again to find the elephant, and first the ape went the faster, and then the tiger went the faster, and then the ape got in front again. But Friend Mouse Deer, sitting on Friend Elephant's back, saw them coming and shouted. "Hallo, Father Ape," said he. "This is a dog's trick indeed. You promised to bring me 2 tigers, and you only bring me 1. I refuse to accept it, Father Ape." Now, when the tiger heard this, he ran off at first as fast as he could. But presently he slackened his pace and said, "It is too bad of you, Friend Ape, for trying to cozen me in order to pay your own debts." "For shame, Father Ape. It was only through good luck that he refused to accept me. If he had accepted, I should have been dead and done with. So now, if you come down to the ground, you shall die the death yourself, just for your trying to cheat me." Thus the tiger and the ape were set at enmity, and to this day the tiger is very wroth with the ape for trying to cheat him. And here the story ends. End of Chapter 10, Part 4. How the Tortoise Outran the Deer, by C.F. Hart. A tortoise met a deer out walking one day, and asked him what he was looking for. The deer answered, "I am out for a walk, to see if I cannot find something to eat. And pray, where are you going, Tortoise?" "Oh, out walking, looking for water to drink." "How soon do you expect to reach the water?" asked the deer. "Why do you ask that question?" returned the tortoise. "Because your legs are so short." "Well," answered the tortoise, "I can run faster than you can. If you are long-legged, you cannot run so fast as I." "Then let us run a race," said the deer. "Well," answered the tortoise, "when shall we run?" "Tomorrow." "At what time?" "Very early in the morning." "All right," assented the tortoise, who then went into the forest and called together his relations, the other tortoises, saying, "Come on, let's catch him." "But how are you going to catch him?" they inquired. "I said to the deer," answered the tortoise, "let us run a race to see who can run the faster. Now I am going to cheat that deer. You scatter yourselves along the edge of the campo, in the forest, keeping not very far from one another, and see that you keep perfectly still, each in his place. Tomorrow, when we begin the race, the deer will run in the campo, but I will remain quietly in my place. When he calls out to me, if you are ahead of him, answer, but take care not to respond if he has passed you." Early the next morning the deer went out to meet the tortoise. "Come," said the former, "let us run." "Wait a bit," said the tortoise, "I am going to run in the woods." "Why, how are you, a little short-legged fellow, going to run in the forest?" asked the deer, surprised. The tortoise insisted that he could not run in the campo, but that he was accustomed to run in the forest, So the deer assented, and the tortoise went into the wood, saying, "When I take my position, I will make a noise with a little stick, so that you may know I am ready." When the tortoise, having reached his place, gave the signal, the deer started off leisurely, laughing to himself, not thinking it worth his while to run. After the deer had gone quite a little distance, he turned around and called out, "Hullo, tortoise!" when to his astonishment a tortoise a little way ahead cried out, "Hullo, deer!" "Well," said the deer to himself, "that tortoise does run fast." Whereupon he hurried up for a bit, and then called out again, but the voice of the tortoise still seemed to be beyond him. "Why, how's this?" exclaimed the deer, and he ran briskly for a little ways till, thinking that he surely must have passed the tortoise, he stopped, turned about, and called again. "Hullo, deer!" the answer came from the edge of the forest just ahead. On this the deer set off at full speed, and after a little, but without stopping this time, he called to the tortoise, and still the cry, "Hullo, deer!" came back to him from ahead. He then redoubled his forces, but with no better success, and at last, tired and bewildered, he ran against a tree and fell dead. The noise made by the feet of the deer having ceased, the first tortoise listened. Not a sound was heard. Then he called to the deer, but received no response. So he went to see what was the matter, and found the deer lying at the foot of the tree. Footnote: This is an Amazonian myth of the Tupi-speaking population, as related in the Lingua Geral. Charles F. Hart. A myth of the slow tortoise, sun, and the swift deer, moon, a race which the sun always wins. End footnote. End of chapter 10, part 5. Which was the stronger, the tortoise, the tapir, or the whale? By C. F. Hart. One day a tortoise went down to the sea to drink. A whale saw him and called out, "Here, what are you doing, tortoise?" "Why, I'm drinking, 'cause I'm thirsty." Then the whale began to make fun of the tortoise's short legs, but the tortoise indignantly replied, "Even if my legs are short, I am stronger than you, and I can pull you on shore." The whale laughed. "Come on, let me see you do it." "Well," said the tortoise, "just wait until I go into the forest and get a sipo." Footnote: A sipo is a long root growing in the air, often used as a rope. End footnote. Away went the tortoise into the forest, and there he met a tapir, who asked him what he was looking for. "I am looking for a sipo." "And what are you going to do with a sipo?" asked the tapir. "I want it to pull you down to the sea." "You!" exclaimed the tapir, surprised. "I'll pull you into the forest, and, what's more—but never mind. Let's try who may be the stronger. Go get your sipo." The tortoise went off, and presently came back with a very long sipo, one end of which he tied around the body of the tapir. "Now," said the tortoise, "wait here until I go down to the sea. When I shake the sipo, run with all your might into the forest." Having attached one end to the tapir, he dragged the other down to the sea and fastened it to the tail of the whale. This accomplished, he said, "I will go up into the forest, and when I shake the sipo, pull as hard as you can, for I am going to draw you on shore." The tortoise then went into the wood midway between the whale and the tapir, shook the sipo, and awaited the result. First the whale, swimming vigorously, dragged the tapir backward to the sea, but the latter, resisting with all his might, finally gained a firm foothold and began to get the better of the whale, drawing him in toward the shore. Then the whale made another effort, and in this manner they kept tugging against one another, each thinking the tortoise at the other end of the seppo, until at last both gave up the struggle from sheer exhaustion. The tortoise then walked down to the shore, and the whale called out to him, "Well, you certainly are strong, Tortoise. I am very tired." The tortoise untied the seppo from the whale, and, having dipped himself in the water, went over to where the tapir was puffing after his labors. "Well, Tapir," he said, as he untied the seppo, "you see that I am the stronger." "It is true, Tortoise. You are very, very strong." Footnote: the tortoise, Sun, has a trial of strength with the tapir, Moon, or perhaps this is the tortoise, Sun, provoking the everlasting tidal contest between sea and land. C.F. Hart. End footnote. End of Chapter 10, Part 6. How the Turtle Got His Shell, by Annie Kerr. Long ago, our fathers have told us, the turtle and the wallaby were friends. Now on a certain day the turtle was hungry, and asked his friend to go with him to the beach, and from thence to the hornbill's garden, where was much sugar cane, and where bananas also were plentiful. This they did, and fed plentifully on all that was there. The wallaby trod upon the stalks of the bananas, and bowed them to the ground, that his friend might eat. Thus did he also to the tall sugar canes and the flowering rush, and they both did eat, and their hunger was stayed. Now, while they were eating, the birds were at work in their gardens, tilling the ground. When the work was finished, they dug up much taro, and returned to the village to cook their food. They peeled the roots and cut them up, and placed them in the pots for cooking. Then said Binama the hornbill, "Let one of you go down to the beach and bring sea water, that our food may be salted." But nothing came of it, for one by one the birds made excuse, fearing lest an enemy lay in wait. At last the wagtail arose and ran into the house to make ready to go to the beach. He hung his shell breastplate around his neck, tied waving feathers round his head, and took his spear and went forth. As he went he leaped from side to side, the better to avoid the foe, if foe there were. In a little while he came to Binama's garden, and saw the turtle and the wallaby feeding. Their hearts trembled. Nevertheless the turtle made bold, and said to the wagtail, "Thy master has bidden us eat of his bananas, that our hunger may be stayed." Now the wagtail knew in his heart that they lied, but he answered never a word, but filled his bottles with sea water, and ran back to the village by another way. When he reached the village he cried aloud, "Friends, the turtle and the wallaby are eating in our master's garden." At this word all arose and ran for their spears, and surrounded the garden. The wallaby lifted up his head, and seeing naught but enemies round him, tarried not, but leaped mightily and escaped. The turtle could not jump, as he well knew, so he crawled with haste into a yam patch, and hid himself under the leaves. The birds knew he was still there, and they hunted for him diligently, until they found him and dragged him forth. The turtle feared greatly, and cried, "Take not vengeance on me, for truly the wallaby bade me come hither, and with his feet he broke the stalks, while I only ate of the fruit." The birds cared little for his words, and tied him to a pole, and thus carried him to Binama's house, where they laid him upon a shelf till the morrow. The next day Binama called his servants together, and all went to dig food to make a feast, when they should slay the turtle. None were in the house but the children whom Binama had set to guard the captive. Then the turtle made his voice soft, and called to the children. "Loosen my bonds, O children," quoth he, "that we may play together." Now the children knew not what was in the turtle's mind, and they did as he bade them. He crawled down from the shelf, and stretched himself, for he was stiff and sore. Then he said to the children, "Where are your ornaments? Leave the poor ones in the basket, and bring forth only the good ones, that I may see them." The children ran to the place where Binama kept his ornaments, and brought forth a long necklace of shell money, also 2 shell armlets and a wooden bowl, and laid them before the turtle. He forthwith wound the necklace many times round his neck, and put on both the shell armlets. Moreover, the bowl he fastened upon his back. Then he said to the children, "Ye behold me now richly attired. Watch, while I run a little and back again, and tell me if the sight is a good one or no." The children watched him crawl a few paces, and called him to return. This the turtle did, and all sat together in the shade of a tree. Then the turtle crawled once more, and the children laughed to watch his ungainly form decorated with their father's ornaments. Again the turtle returned to the children, but this time he did not sit with them, for on a sudden he heard voices and knew the men were drawing near. Then he saw them as they came forth, and ran swiftly to the sea. The children cried aloud to their father, "Come, for the turtle is running away." When Binama heard this cry, he and the birds with him threw the sheaves of taro aside, and gave chase to the runaway. But the turtle had already reached the sea, and he hastened to dive. The birds called, "Show thyself now, lift up thy head." So the turtle did so, and the angry birds cast great stones into the sea, and the left armlet which the turtle wore was shattered. So he dived, but they called again, "Show thyself, lift up thy head." And a stone fell upon the right armlet and broke it into small pieces. Again they called, and again the turtle raised himself in the water, and this time the stones cut the string on which the necklace of shell money was threaded. And now for the last time came the call, "Show thyself, lift up thy head." The turtle once more raised himself, and the birds flung after him all the great stones they could find. They fell in scores upon the wooden bowl, which had been carried away from Binama's home, but it was not destroyed, nay, nor was it harmed at all, and the turtle fled far over the sea, nor was he seen again of Binama or his followers. But since that day, even until now, so our fathers have told us, all turtles carry upon their backs the bowl which in the old days was in the house of Binama. End of Chapter 10, Part 7. The Legend of Rata by Sir George Grey. Wahiroa had been treacherously slain by a chief named Matuku. So it became the duty of his young son Rata to revenge his father's death. By the time he had grown up, he had devised a plan for doing this, and gave the necessary orders to his followers. He then started on a journey. Arrived at the entrance to Matuku's place, he found a man sitting in the courtyard who had been left in charge. "Where's the man who killed my father?" he asked. "He lives down in the earth, and I called to warn him when the new moon appears. That is when he comes upon the earth to do battle. How can he know when the proper time comes? I called to him in a loud voice, 'When will there be a new moon?' 'In 2 nights. Return to your village, but come here again on the morning of the 2nd day." On the morning appointed, Rata returned and found the man sitting in the same place. "Do you know any spot where I can conceal myself from the enemy with whom I am about to fight?" he inquired. The man replied, "Come with me, and I will show you the 2 fountains of clear water." "This spot that we stand on," said the man, when they arrived at the place, "is the place where Matuku rises up from the earth, and yonder fountain is the one on which he combs and washes his dishevelled hair. But this fountain is the one he uses to reflect his face in while he dresses it. You cannot kill him while he is at the fountain he uses to reflect his face in, because your shadow would also be reflected in it, and he would see it. But at the fountain in which he washes his hair, you may smite and slay him." "Will he make his appearance this evening?" "Yes." They had not waited long when the moon became visible, and the man told Rata to hide himself near the brink of the fountain in which Matuku would wash his hair. Then he shouted aloud, "Ho, ho, the new moon is visible, a moon 2 days old." Matuku heard him, and seizing his 2-handed wooden sword, rose from the earth. He laid his sword on the ground at the edge of the fountain where he dressed his hair, and kneeling down on both sides of it, he loosened the strings which bound up his long locks, shook them out, and plunged his head into the clear, cool water. Rata crept out from where he lay hid, and rapidly moved up and stood behind him. As Matuku raised his head above the water, Rata, with one hand, seized him by the hair, while with the other he smote and slew him. "Where shall I find the bones of my father?" he next asked the keeper. "They are not here. A strange people who live at a distance came and carried them off." Upon hearing this reply, Rata returned to his village to think matters over. He went to the forest, and, having found a very tall tree that grew straight throughout its entire length, he felled it and cut its noble branching tops, intending to fashion the trunk into a canoe. The insects which inhabit trees and the spirits of the forest were very angry at this, and as soon as Rata had returned to the village, when his day's work was done, they took the tree and raised it up again. The multitude of insects, birds, and spirits worked away at replacing each little chip and shaving in its proper place, and sang as they worked, "Fly together, chips and shavings, stick ye fast together, hold ye fast together, stand upright again, O tree." Early the next morning Rata came back. When he got to the place where he had left the trunk lying on the ground, he could not at first find it. That fine, tall, straight tree, which he saw standing whole and sound, was the same, he thought, he had cut down, and there it was now, erect again. However, he stepped up to it, and, hewing away, he felled it to the ground once more. Off he cut its fine branching top, and he began to hollow out the hold of the canoe, and round off the prow and the stern into their proper gracefully curved forms. In the evening, when it became too dark to work, he returned to his village. As soon as he was gone, the multitudes of insects, birds, and spirits raised up the tree upon its stump once more. They sang as they worked, and when they had ended, the tree again stood as sound as ever in its former place in the forest. Morning dawned, and Rata returned once more to work at his canoe. When he reached the place, was not he amazed to see the tree standing, untouched, just as he had first found it? Nothing daunted, however, he hews away at it again, and down it topples, crashing to the earth. As soon as he saw the tree on the ground, Rata went off, as if going home, but turned back and hid himself in the underwood, in a spot whence he could peep out and see what took place. He had not been hidden long, when he heard the innumerable multitude of the children of Tani approaching, singing their incantations, and at last they arrived at the place where the tree was lying on the ground. Rata rushed upon them. He seized some of them, shouting, "Ha, ha! It is you, is it, who have been exercising your magical arts upon my tree?" Then the children of Tani all cried aloud in reply, "Who gave you authority to fell the forest god to the ground? You had no right to do so." When Rata heard this, he was overcome with shame at what he had done. The children of Tani called out to him, "Return, O Rata, to thy village. We will make a canoe for you." And Rata obeyed their orders without delay. They were so numerous, and each understood so well what to do, that they had no sooner begun to adze out a canoe than it was finished. When the canoe was afloat upon the sea, 140 warriors embarked on board it, and they paddled off to seek their foe. One night, just at nightfall, they reached the fortress of their enemy. Rata landed alone, leaving all his warriors on board. As he stole along the shore, he saw that a fire was burning on the sacred place where the enemy sacrificed to their gods. Without stopping, he crept directly towards the fire and hid behind some thick bushes. There were several priests, and to assist them in their magical arts, they were using the bones of Wahiroa, knocking them together, to beat time while repeating a powerful incantation known only to themselves. Rata listened attentively to this incantation until he had learned it by heart, and when he was quite sure he knew it, he rushed suddenly upon the priest. Being ignorant of the numbers of the enemy or whence they came, they made little resistance and were in a moment overcome. The bones of his father, Wahiroa, were then eagerly snatched up. He hastened with them back to the canoe, embarked on board it, and his warriors at once paddled away. Rata's task of avenging his father's death being thus ended, his tribe hauled up his large canoe on the shore and roofed it over with thatch to protect it from the sun and weather. End of Chapter 10, Part 8. Why the Hippopotamus Lives in the Water, by Elphinstone Dayrell, FRGS, FRAI. Many years ago, the hippopotamus, whose name was Isentim, was one of the biggest kings on the land. He was second only to the elephant. The hippo had 7 large fat wives, of whom he was very fond. Now and then he used to give a big feast to the people, but a curious thing was that, although everyone knew the hippo, no one, except his 7 wives, knew his name. At one of the feasts, just as the people were about to sit down, the hippo said, "You have come to feed at my table, but none of you know my name. If you cannot tell my name, you shall all of you go away without your dinner." As they could not guess his name, they had to go away and leave all the good food behind them. Before they left, however, the Tortoise stood up and asked the Hippopotamus what he would do if he told him his name at the next feast. So the Hippo replied that he would be so ashamed of himself that he and his whole family would leave the land and for the future would dwell in the water. Now it was the custom for the Hippo and his 7 wives to go down every morning and evening to the river to wash and have a drink. Of this custom the Tortoise was aware. The Hippo used to walk first, and the 7 wives followed. One day, when they had gone down to the river to bathe, the Tortoise made a small hole in the middle of the path and then waited. When the Hippo and his wives returned, 2 of the wives were some distance behind, so the Tortoise came out from where he had been hiding, and half buried himself in the hole he had dug, leaving the greater part of his shell exposed. When the 2 Hippo wives came along, the first one knocked her foot against the Tortoise's shell, and immediately called out to her husband, "Oh, isn't him my husband? I have hurt my foot." At this the Tortoise was very glad, and went joyfully home. When the next feast was given by the Hippo, he made the same condition about his name. So the Tortoise got up and said, "You promise you will not kill me if I tell you your name?" And the Hippo promised. The Tortoise then shouted as loud as he was able, "Your name is Isn't-him," at which a cheer went up from all the people, and then they sat down to dinner. When the feast was over, the Hippo with his 7 wives, in accordance with his promise, went down to the river, and they have always lived in the water from that day till now. Although they come up on shore to feed at night, you never find a Hippo on the land in the daytime. End of Chapter 10, Part 9. Why the Elephant Has Small Eyes, by Elphinstone Dayrell, FRGS, FRAI. When Ambo was king of Calabar, the elephant was not only a very big animal, but he had eyes in proportion to his bulk. In those days, men and animals were friends, and all mixed together quite freely. At regular intervals King Ambo used to give a feast, and the elephant used to eat more than anyone, though the hippopotamus used to do his best. However, not being as big as the elephant, although he was very fat, he was left a long way behind. As the elephant ate so much at these feasts, the Tortoise, who was small and very cunning, made up his mind to put a stop to the elephant eating more than a fair share of the food provided. He therefore placed some dry kernels and shrimps, of which the elephant was very fond, in his bag, and went to the elephant's house to make an afternoon call. When the Tortoise arrived, the elephant told him to sit down, so he made himself comfortable, and, having shut one eye, took 1 palm kernel and a shrimp out of his bag, and commenced to eat them with relish. When the elephant saw the Tortoise eating, he said, as he was always hungry himself, "You seem to have some good food there. What are you eating?" The Tortoise replied that the food was sweet, but was rather painful, as he was eating one of his eyes, and he lifted up his head, showing one eye closed. The elephant said, "If the food is so good, take out one of my eyes and give me the same food." The Tortoise, who was waiting for this, knowing how greedy the elephant was, said, "I cannot reach your eye, you are so big." So the elephant took the Tortoise in his trunk and lifted him up, and with one quick scoop he had the elephant's eye out. The elephant trumpeted with pain, but the Tortoise gave him some of the dried kernels and shrimps, and they so pleased the elephant that he soon forgot the pain. Soon the elephant said, "That food is so sweet, I must have some more." But the Tortoise told him that before he could have any the other eye must come out. To this the Elephant agreed, and soon the Elephant was quite blind. The Elephant then began to make a great noise, and started pulling trees down and doing much damage, calling out for the Tortoise. The Tortoise had slid down the Elephant's trunk to the ground and hid himself. The next morning, when the Elephant heard the people passing, he asked them what the time was, and the bush-buck, who was nearest, shouted out, "The sun is now up, and I am going to market to get some yams and fresh leaves for my food." Then the Elephant perceived that the Tortoise had deceived him, and began to ask all the passers-by to lend him a pair of eyes, as he could not see, but every one refused, as they wanted their eyes themselves. At last the Worm grovelled past, and seeing the big Elephant, greeted him in his humble way. He was much surprised when the king of the forest returned his salutation, and very much flattered also. The Elephant said, "Look here, Worm, I have mislaid my eyes. Will you lend me yours for a few days? I will return them next market day." The Worm was so flattered at being noticed by the Elephant that he gladly consented, and took his eyes out, which, as everyone knows, were very small, and gave them to the Elephant. When the Elephant had put the Worm's eyes into his own large eye sockets, the flesh immediately closed round them so tightly that when the market day arrived it was impossible for the Elephant to get them out again to return to the Worm. And, although the Worm repeatedly made applications to the Elephant to return his eyes, the Elephant always pretended not to hear, and sometimes used to say, in a very loud voice, "If there are any worms about, they had better get out of my way, as they are so small I cannot see them, and if I tread on them, they will be squashed." Ever since then the worms have been blind, and for the same reason elephants have such small eyes, quite out of proportion to the size of their huge bodies. End of Chapter 10, Part 10.
Of Various Lands, Part 11. The Boy Who Set a Snare for the Sun, by H.R. Schoolcraft. At the time when the animals reigned on the earth, they had killed all the people but a girl and her little brother, and these two were living in fear in an out-of-the-way place. The boy was a perfect little pygmy, and never grew beyond the size of a mere infant, but the girl increased with her years, so that the task of providing food and shelter fell wholly upon her. She went out daily to get wood for the lodge fire, and she took her little brother with her that no mishap might befall them, for he was too little to leave alone. A big bird of a mischievous disposition might have flown away with him. She made him a bow and arrows, and one day she said to him, "My little brother, I will leave you behind where I have been gathering the wood. You must hide yourself, and you will soon see the snowbirds come and peck the worms out of the logs which I have piled up. Shoot one of them and bring it home." He obeyed her and tried his best to kill one, but he came home unsuccessful. His sister told him that he must not despair, but try again the next day. She accordingly left him at the gathering place of the wood and returned to the lodge. Toward nightfall, she heard his little footsteps crackling through the snow, and he hurried in and threw down, with an air of triumph, one of the birds which he had killed.
"My sister," said he, "I wish you to skin it, and stretch the skin, and when I have killed more, I will have a coat made out of them." "But what shall we do with the body?" said she, for they had always up to that time lived upon greens and berries. "Cut it in two," he answered, "and season us too with one half of it at a time."
It was their first dish of game, and they greatly relished it. The boy kept on in his efforts, and in the course of time he killed 10 birds, out of the skins of which his sister made him a pretty little coat. As he was small, there was 1 bird's skin to spare.
"Sister,"
said he one day, as he marched up and down before the lodge, dressed in his new coat and fancying himself the greatest little fellow in the world, as he was, for there was no other beside him.
"My sister, are we really alone in this world, or are we making believe? Is there nobody else living? And tell me, was all this great broad earth and this huge big sky made for a little boy and girl like you and me?"
"By no means," she said, and then she explained to him that there were many folks very unlike a harmless girl and boy, such as they were, who lived in another part of the earth, and that if he would live blameless and not endanger his life, he must never go where they were. This only served to inflame the boy's curiosity, and he soon took his bow and arrows and went in that direction. After walking a long while and meeting no one, he became tired and stretched himself upon a high green knoll, where the day's warmth had melted off the snow. It was a charming place to lie upon, and he fell asleep. While he slept, the sun beat so hot upon him that it singed his bird-skin coat, and so shriveled and shrunk it upon his body as to wake him up. When he saw the mischief the sun's fiery beams had played with the coat he was so proud of, he flew into a great rage and scolded the sun in a terrible way for a little boy no higher than a man's knee.
"Do not think you are too high for me to get you," said he. "I shall revenge myself, O sun. I will have you for a plaything yet."
When he reached home, he told his sister how unfortunate he had been, and bitterly bewailed the spoiling of his new coat. He would not eat, not so much as a single berry. He lay down like one who fasts, without changing his position for 10 days. Nor could his sister persuade him to get up. At the end of 10 days, he turned over on the other side, and lay in that position for 10 days. When he got up, he was very pale, but very determined. He ordered his sister to make him a snare, as he meant to catch the sun. She said she had nothing, but presently she brought forward a deer's sinew, which their father had left, and made it into a string suitable for a noose. The moment she showed it to her brother, he said it would not do, and angrily bade her find something else. She said she had nothing else, but presently remembered the bird's skin that had been left over when the coat was made, and this she made into a string. With this, The boy was more vexed than over the other.
"The sun has had enough of my bird skins," he said. "Find something else."
She did not dare to say again that she had nothing, so she went out of the lodge, murmuring to herself,
"Was there ever so obstinate a boy?"
Luckily she thought of her hair, and pulling out some of it here and there from among her beautiful black locks, she quickly braided it into a fine cord and handed it to her brother. The moment his eye fell on it, he was delighted, and immediately began to run it back and forth through his hands, trying its strength. Satisfied that the long, glossy coil was strong enough, he wound it around his shoulders and set out from the lodge a little after midnight, his object being to catch the sun before he rose. Having fixed his snare firmly at a place where the sun must strike the land as it rose above the earth, he waited patiently. The instant it appeared he drew the cord tight so that the sun was held fast and could not rise. Soon there was a great commotion among the animals who ruled the earth. They had no light and ran to and fro, calling out to each other and asking what had happened. They called together a council to discuss the matter. An old dormouse, suspecting what was the trouble, proposed that someone should be appointed to go out and cut the cord. This was a bold thing to do, as the rays of the sun would surely burn whoever ventured near them. No one seemed willing to run the risk, so the dormouse himself undertook to go. The dormouse was, at this time, the largest animal in the world. When he stood up, he looked like a mountain. He made haste to the place where the sun lay ensnared, and as it came nearer and nearer, its back began to smoke and burn with the heat, and the whole top of its huge body was turned in a very short time to enormous heaps of ashes. The dormouse did succeed, however, in cutting the cord with its teeth, and the sun blazed up into the high blue sky, as beautiful as ever. The poor dormouse paid the price of his bravery. So great was the heat of the sun that he found himself, when it was all over, shrunk to a little bit of a thing, and that is the reason why the dormouse is one of the tiniest creatures on the earth. The little boy returned home. When he discovered that the sun had escaped his snare and devoted himself entirely to hunting.
"If the beautiful hair of my sister would not hold the sun fast, nothing in the world could,"
he said.
"I was not born, a little fellow like me, to look after the sun. It takes someone greater and wiser than I to do that."
Whereupon he went out and shot 10 more snowbirds, for at that he was very expert, and had a new bird-skin coat made, which was prettier than the one he had worn before. End of Chapter 10, Part 11.
Bird Lover by Cornelius Matthews. In a region of country where the forest and prairie strived which should be the most beautiful, the open plain with its free sunshine and winds and flowers, or the closed wood with its delicious twilight walks and enamored haunts, there lived a wicked Manito in the disguise of an old Indian. Although the country furnished an abundance of game and whatever else a good heart could wish for, it was the study of this wicked genius to destroy such as fell into his hands. He made use of all his arts to decoy men into his power for the purpose of killing them. The country had been once thickly peopled, but the Mudgy Monito had so thinned it by his cruel practices that he now lived almost solitary in the wilderness. The secret of his success lay in his great speed. He had the power to assume the shape of any four-footed creature, and it was his custom to challenge such as he sought to destroy to run with him. He had a beaten path on which he ran, leading around a large lake, and he always ran around this circle, so that the starting and the winning post was the same. Whoever failed, as everyone had, yielded up his life at this post, and although he ran every day, no man was ever known to beat this evil genius, for whenever he was pressed hard, he changed himself into a fox, wolf, deer, or other swift-footed animal, and was thus able to leave his competitor behind. The whole country was in dread of this same Mudgy Monito, and yet the young men were constantly running with him, for if they refused, he called them cowards, which was a reproach they could not bear. They would rather die than be called cowards. To keep up his sport, the Monito made light of these deadly foot matches, and instead of assuming a braggart air, and going about in a boastful way, with the blood of such as he had overcome upon his hands, he adopted very pleasing manners, and visited the lodges around the country as any other sweet-tempered and harmless old Indian might. His secret object in these friendly visits was to learn whether the young boys were getting old enough to run with him. He kept a very sharp eye upon their growth, and the day he thought them ready, he did not fail to challenge them to a trial on his racing ground. There was not a family in all that beautiful region which had not in this way been visited and thinned out, and the Monito had quite naturally come to be held in abhorrence by all the Indian mothers in the country. It happened that there lived near him a poor widow woman, whose husband and 7 sons he had made away with, and she was now living with an only daughter, and a son 10 or 12 years old. This woman was very poor and feeble, and she suffered so much for lack of food and other comforts of the lodge, that she would have been glad to die, but for her daughter and her little son. The Mudgy Monito had already visited her lodge to observe whether the boy was sufficiently grown to be challenged to the race, and so crafty in his approaches and so soft in his manners was the Monito, that the mother feared that he would yet decoy the son and make away with him, as he had done with his father and his 7 brothers, in spite of all her struggles to save him. And yet she strove with all her might to strengthen her son in every good course. She taught him as best she could what was becoming for the wise hunter and the brave warrior. She remembered and set before him all that she could recall of the skill and the craft of his father and his brothers who were lost. The widow woman also instructed her daughter in whatever should make her useful as a wife, and in the leisure time of the lodge she gave her lessons in the art of working with the quills of porcupine, and bestowed on her such other accomplishments as should make her an ornament and a blessing to her husband's household. The daughter, Minda by name, was kind and obedient to her mother, and never failed in her duty. Their lodge stood high up on the banks of a lake, which gave them a wide prospect of country, embellished with groves and open fields, which waved with the blue light of their long grass, and made at all hours of sun and moon a cheerful scene to look upon. Across this beautiful prairie Minda had one morning made her way to gather dry limbs for their fire, for she disdained no labor of the lodge, and while enjoying the sweetness of the air and the green beauty of the woods, she strolled far away. She had come to a bank, painted with flowers of every hue, and was reclining on its fragrant couch, when a bird of red and deep blue plumage, softly blended, alighted on a branch nearby, and began to pour forth its carol. It was a bird of strange character, such as she had never before seen. Its first note was so delicious to the ear of Minda, and it so pierced to her young heart, that she listened as she had never before to any mortal or heavenly sound. It seemed like the human voice, forbidden to speak, and uttering its language through this wild wood chant with a mournful melody, as if it bewailed the lack of the power or the right to make itself more plainly intelligible. The voice of the bird rose and fell, and circled round and round, that whithersoever floated or spread out its notes, they seemed ever to have their centre where Minda sat, and she looked with sad eyes into the sad eyes of the mournful bird, that sat in his red and deep blue plumage just opposite to the flowery bank. The poor bird strove more and more with his voice, and seemed ever more and more anxiously to address his notes of lament to Minda's ears, till at last she could not refrain from saying, "What aileth thee, sad bird?" As if he had but waited to be spoken to, the bird left his branch, and alighted upon the bank, smiling on Minda, and shaking his shining plumage, answered, "I am bound in this condition until a maiden shall accept me in marriage. I have wandered these groves, and sung to many and many of the Indian girls, but none ever heeded my voice till you. Will you be mine?" he added, and poured forth a flood of melody which sparkled and spread itself with its sweet murmurs over all the scene, and fairly entranced the young Minda, who sat silent, as if she feared to break the charm by speech. The bird, approaching nearer, asked her if she loved him, to get her mother's consent to their marriage. "I shall be free then," said the bird, "and you shall know me as I am." Minda lingered and listened to the sweet voice of the bird in its own forest notes, or filling each pause with gentle human discourse, questioning her as to her home, her family, and the little incidents of her daily life. She returned to the lodge later than usual, but she was too timid to speak to her mother of that which the bird had charged her. She returned again and again to the fragrant haunt in the wood, and every day she listened to the song and the discourse of her bird admirer with more pleasure, and he every day besought her to speak to her mother of the marriage. This she could not, however, muster heart and courage to do. At last the widow began herself to have a suspicion that her daughter's heart was in the wood, from her long delays in returning, and the little success she had in gathering the fire branches for which she went in search. In answer to her mother's questions, Minda revealed the truth, and made known her lover's request. The mother, considering the lonely and destitute condition of her little household, gave her consent. The daughter, with light steps, hastened with the news to the wood. The bird lover of course heard it with delight, and fluttered through the air in happy circles, and poured forth a song of joy, which thrilled Minda to the heart. He said that he would come to the lodge at sunset, and immediately took wing, while Minda hung fondly upon his flight, till he was lost far away in the blue sky. With the twilight, the bird lover, whose name was Mondoa, appeared at the door of the lodge as a hunter with a red plume and a mantle of blue upon his shoulders. He addressed the widow as his friend, and she directed him to sit down beside her daughter, and they were regarded as man and wife. Early on the following morning, he asked for the bow and arrows of those who had been slain by the wicked Manito, and went out a-hunting. As soon as he had got out of sight of the lodge, he changed himself into the wood bird, as he had been before his marriage, and took his flight through the air. Although game was scarce in the neighborhood of the widow's lodge, Mondoa returned at evening in his character of a hunter with 2 deer. This was his daily practice, and the widow's family never more lacked for food. It was noticed, however, that Mondoa himself ate but little, and that of a peculiar kind of meat flavored with berries, which with other circumstances convinced them that he was not as the Indian people around him. In a few days his mother-in-law told him that the Manito would come to pay them a visit, to see how the young man, her son, prospered. Mondoa answered that he should not on that day be absent. When the time arrived, he flew upon a tall tree overlooking the lodge, and took his station there as the wicked Manito passed in. The mudgy Manito cast sharp glances at the scaffold so well laden with meat, and as soon as he had entered, he said, "Why, who is it that is furnishing you with meat so plentifully?" "No one," she answered, "but my son. He is just beginning to kill deer." "No, no," he retorted, "someone is living with you." "Kaween, no indeed," replied the widow. "You are only making sport of my hapless condition. Who do you think would come and trouble themselves about me?" "Very well," answered the Manito. "I will go, but on such a day I will again visit you, and see who it is that furnishes the meat, and whether it is your son or not." He had no sooner left the lodge and got out of sight, when the son-in-law made his appearance with 2 more deer. On being made acquainted with the conduct of the Manito, "Very well," he said, "I will be at home the next time to see him." Both the mother and the wife urged Mondoa to be aware of the Manito. They made known to him all of his cruel courses, and assured him that no man could escape from his power. "No matter," said Mondoa. "If he invites me to the race ground, I will not be backward. What follows may teach him, my mother, to show pity on the vanquished, and not to trample on the widow and those who are without fathers." When the day of the visit of the Manito arrived, Mondoa told his wife to prepare certain pieces of meat, which he pointed out to her, together with 2 or 3 buds of the birch tree, which he requested her to put in the pot. He directed also that the Manito should be hospitably received, as if he had been just the kind-hearted old Indian he professed to be. Mondoa then dressed himself as a warrior, embellishing his visage with tints of red to show that he was prepared for either war or peace. As soon as the mudgy Manito arrived, he eyed this strange warrior, whom he had never seen before, but he dissembled as usual, and with a gentle laugh said to the widow, "Did not I tell you that someone was staying with you? For I knew your son was too young to hunt." The widow excused herself by saying that she did not think it necessary to tell him, inasmuch as he was a Manito, and must have known before he asked. The Manito was very pleasant with Mondoa, and after much other discourse in a gentle spoken voice, he invited him to the racing ground, saying it was a manly amusement, that he would have an excellent chance to meet there with other warriors, and that he should himself be pleased to run with him. Mondoa would have excused himself, saying that he knew nothing of running. "Why," replied the mudgy Manito, trembling in every limb as he spoke, "don't you see how old I look? While you are young and full of life, we must at least run a little to amuse others." "Be it so, then," replied Mondoa. "I will oblige you. I will go in the morning." Pleased with his crafty success, the Manito would have now taken his leave, but he was pressed to remain and partake of their hospitality. The meal was immediately prepared, but 1 dish was used. Mondoa partook of it first, to show his guest that he need not fear, saying at the same time, "It is a feast, and as we seldom meet, we must eat all that is placed on the dish, as a mark of gratitude to the Great Spirit for permitting me to kill animals, and for the pleasure of seeing you and partaking of it with you." They ate and talked on this and that until they had nearly dispatched the meal, when the Manito took up the dish and drank off the broth at a breath. On setting it down, he immediately turned his head and commenced coughing with great violence. The old body in which he had disguised himself was well nigh shaken in pieces, for he had, as Mondoa expected, swallowed a grain of the birch bud, and this, which relished to himself as being of the bird nature, greatly distressed the old Manito, who partook of the character of an animal or 4-footed thing. He was at last put to such confusion of face by his constant coughing, that he was enforced to leave, saying, or rather hiccoughing, as he left the lodge, that he should look for the young man at the racing ground in the morning. When the morning came, Mondoa was early astir, oiling his limbs and enameling his breast and arms with red and blue, resembling the plumage in which he had first appeared to Minda. Upon his brow he placed a tuft of feathers of the same shining tints. By his invitation, his wife Minda, the mother, and her young son attended Mondoa to the Monito's racing ground. The lodge of the Monito stood upon a high ground, and near it stretched out a long row of other lodges, said to be possessed by wicked kindred of his, who shared in the spoils of his cruelty. As soon as the young hunter and his party approached, the inmates appeared at their lodge doors and cried out, "We are visited." At this cry, the Mudgy Monito came forth and descended with his companions to the starting post on the plain. From this the course could be seen, winding in a long girdle about the lake, and as they were now all assembled, the old Monito began to speak of the race, belting himself up and pointing to the post, which was an upright pillar of stone. "But before we start," said the Monito, "I wish it to be understood that when men run with me I make a wager, and I expect them to abide by it, life against life." "Very well, be it so," answered Mondoa. "We shall see whose head is to be dashed against the stone." "We shall," rejoined the Mudgy Monito. "I am very old, but I shall try and make a run." "Very well," again rejoined Mondoa. "I hope we shall both stand to our bargain." "Good," said the old Monito, and he at the same time cast a sly glance at the young hunter, and rolled his eyes toward where stood the pillar of stone. "I am ready," said Mondoa. The starting shout was given, and they set off at high speed, the Monito leading and Mondoa pressing closely after. As he closed upon him, the old Monito began to show his power, and changing himself into a fox, he passed the young hunter with ease, and went leisurely along. Mondoa now, with a glance upward, took the shape of a strange bird of red and deep blue plumage, and with one flight, lighting at some distance ahead of the Monito, resumed his mortal shape. When the Mudgy Monito espied his competitor before him, "Whoa, whoa!" he exclaimed, "this is strange," and he immediately changed himself into a wolf and sped past Mondoa. As he galloped by, Mondoa heard a noise from his throat, and he knew that he was still in distress from the birch bud, which he had swallowed at his mother-in-law's lodge. Mondoa again took wing, and shooting into the air, he descended suddenly with great swiftness and took the path far ahead of the old Monito. As he passed the wolf, he whispered in his ear, "My friend, is this the extent of your speed?" The Monito began to be troubled with bad forebodings, for on looking ahead, he saw the young hunter in his own manly form, running along at leisure. The Mudgy Monito, seeing the necessity of more speed, now passed Mondoa in the shape of a deer. They were now far around the circle of the lake, and fast closing in upon the starting post, when Mondoa, putting on his red and blue plumage, glided along the air and alighted upon the track far in advance. To overtake him, the old Monito assumed the shape of a buffalo, and he pushed on with such long gallops that he was again the foremost on the course. The buffalo was the last change he could make, and it was in this form that he had most frequently conquered. The young hunter, once more a bird, in the act of passing the Monito, saw his tongue lolling from his mouth with fatigue. "My friend," said Mondoa, "is this all your speed?" The Monito made no answer. Mondoa had resumed his character of a hunter, and was within a run of the winning post, when the wicked Monito had nearly overtaken him. "Baka, baka, Neji," he called out to Mondoa. "Stop, my friend, I wish to talk to you." Mondoa laughed aloud as he replied, "I will speak to you at the starting post. When men run with me, I make a wager, and I expect them to abide by it. Life against life." One more flight as the blue bird with red wings, and Mondoa was so near to the goal that he could easily reach it in his mortal shape, shining in beauty, lighted up like the sky, with tinted arms and bosom gleaming in the sun, and the party-colored plume on his brow waving in the wind. Mondoa, cheered by a joyful shout from his own people, leaped to the post. The Monito came on with fear in his face. "My friend," he said, "spare my life," and then added in a low voice, as he would not that the others should hear it, "Give me to live," and he began to move off as if the request had been granted. "As you have done to others," replied Mondoa. so shall it be done to you. And seizing the wicked Manito, he dashed him against the pillar of stone. His kindred, who were looking on in horror, raised a cry of fear and fled away in a body to some distant land, whence they have never returned. The widow's family left the scene, and when they had all come out into the open fields, they walked on together until they had reached the fragrant bank and the evergreen wood, where the daughter had first encountered her bird lover. Mondoa, turning to the widow, said, "My mother, here we must part. Your daughter and myself must now leave you. The good spirit, moved with pity, has allowed me to be your friend. I have done that for which I was sent. I am permitted to take with me the one whom I love. I have found your daughter ever kind, gentle, and just. She shall be my companion. The blessing of the good spirit be ever with you. Farewell, my mother, my brother, farewell." While the widow woman was still lost in wonder at these words, Mondoa and Minda, his wife, changed at the same moment, rose into the air as beautiful birds, clothed in shining colors of red and blue. They caroled together as they flew, and their songs were happy, and falling like clear drops, as they rose and winged their way far upward. A delicious peace came into the mind of the poor widow woman, and she returned to her lodge deeply thankful at heart for all the goodness that had been shown to her by the Master of Life. From that day forth she never knew want, and her young son proved a comfort to her lodge, and the tuneful carol of Mondoa and Minda, as it fell from heaven, was a music always, go whither she would, sounding peace and joy in her ear. End of Chapter 10. Animal Myths from Various Lands. Part 12. The Bird Lover. Recording by Peter Strom, Sabetha, Kansas, on July 21st, 2018.
Past, we cannot tell exactly how many years ago, a poor Indian was living with his wife and children in a beautiful part of the country. He was not only poor, but he was not expert in procuring food for his family, and his children were too young to give him assistance. Although of a lowly condition and straitened in his circumstances, he was a man of kind and contented disposition. He was always thankful to the Great Spirit for everything he received. He even stood in the door of his lodge to bless the birds that flew past in the summer evenings, although, if he had been of a complaining temper, he might have repined that they were not rather spread upon the table for his evening meal. The same generous and sweet disposition was inherited by his eldest son, who had now arrived at the proper age to undertake the ceremony of the fast, to learn what kind of a spirit would be his guide and guardian through life. Wunzh, for this was his name, had been an obedient boy from his infancy, pensive, thoughtful, and gentle, so that he was beloved by the whole family. As soon as the first buds of spring appeared, and the delicious fragrance of the young year began to sweeten the air, his father, with the help of his younger brothers, built for Wunzh the customary little lodge, at a retired spot at some distance from their own, where he would not be disturbed during the solemn rite. To prepare himself, Wunzh sought to clear his heart of every evil thought, and to think of nothing that was not good and beautiful and kindly. That he might store his mind with pleasant ideas for his dreams, for the first few days he amused himself by walking in the woods and over the mountains, examining the early plants and flowers. As he rambled far and wide through the wild country, he felt a strong desire to know how the plants and herbs and berries grew without any aid from man, and why it was that some kinds were good to eat and that others were possessed of medicinal or poisonous power. After he had become too languid to walk about and confined himself strictly to the lodge, he recalled these thoughts, and turning them in his mind, he wished he could dream of something that would prove a benefit to his father and family, and to all others of his fellow creatures. True, thought Wunzh, the Great Spirit made all things, and it is to him that we owe our lives. Could he not make it easier for us to get our food than by hunting animals and taking fish? I must try to find this out in my visions." On the third day, Wunzh became weak and faint and kept to his bed. Suddenly he fancied, as he lay thus, that a bright light came in at the lodge door, and ere he was aware, he saw a handsome young man with a complexion of the softest and purest white coming down from the sky and advancing toward him. The beautiful stranger was richly and gaily dressed, having on a great many garments of green and yellow colors, but differing in their deeper or lighter shades. He had a plume of waving feathers on his head, and all his motions were graceful, and reminded Wunzh of the deep green of the summer grass, and the clear amber of the summer sky, and the gentle blowing of the summer wind. Beautiful as the stranger was, he paused on a little mound of earth just before the door of the lodge. "I am sent to you, my friend," said his celestial visitor, in a voice most soft and musical to listen to. "I am sent to you by that great Spirit who made all things in the sky and on the earth. He has seen and knows your motives in fasting. He sees that it is from a kind and benevolent wish to do good to your people and to procure a benefit for them that you do not seek for strength in war or the praise of the men of the bloody hand. I am sent to instruct you and to show you how you can do your kindred good." He then told the young man to arise and to prepare to wrestle with him, as it was only by this means that he could hope to succeed in his wishes. Wunzh knew how weak he was from fasting, but the voice of the stranger was cheery, and put such a courage in his heart that he promptly sprang up, determined to die rather than fail. Brave Wunzh! If you ever accomplish anything, it will be through the power of the resolve that spake within you at that moment. He began the trial, and after a long sustained struggle he was almost overpowered, when the beautiful stranger said, "My friend, it is enough for once. I will come again to try you." And smiling on him, he returned through the air in the same direction in which he had come. The next day, although he saw how sweetly the wild flowers bloomed upon the slopes and the birds warbled from the woodland, he longed to see the celestial visitor and to hear his voice. To his great joy, he reappeared at the same hour, toward the going down of the sun, and re-challenged Wunzh to a trial of strength. The brave Wunzh felt that his strength of body was even less than on the day before, but the courage of his mind seemed to grow. Observing this, and how Wunzh put his whole heart in the struggle, the stranger again spoke to him in the words he used before, adding, "Tomorrow will be your last trial. Be strong, my friend, for this is the only way in which you can overcome me and obtain the boon you seek." The light which shone after him as he left Wunzh was brighter than before. On the third day he came again and renewed the struggle. Very faint in body was poor Wunzh, but he was stronger at heart than ever, and determined to prevail now or perish. He put forth his utmost powers, and after a contest more severe than either of the others, the stranger ceased his efforts and declared himself conquered. For the first time he entered Wunzh's little fasting lodge, and sitting down beside the youth, he began to deliver his instructions to inform him in what manner he should proceed to take advantage of his victory. "You have won your desire of the Great Spirit," said the beautiful stranger. "You have wrestled manfully. Tomorrow will be the 7th day of your fasting. Your father will give you food to strengthen you, and as it is the last day of trial, you will prevail. I know this, and now tell you what you must do to benefit your family and your people." "Tomorrow," he repeated, "I shall meet you and wrestle with you for the last time. As soon as you have prevailed against me, you will strip off my garments and throw me down, clean the earth of roots and weeds, make it soft, and bury me in the spot. When you have done this, leave my body in the earth, and do not disturb it, but come at times to visit the place to see whether I have come to life, and above all, be careful to never let the grass or weeds grow upon my grave. Once a month, cover me with fresh earth. If you follow these my instructions, you will accomplish your object of doing good to your fellow creatures by teaching them the knowledge I now teach you." He then shook Wunzh by the hand and disappeared, but he was gone so soon that Wunzh could not tell what direction he took. In the morning, Wunzh's father came to his lodge with some slight refreshments, saying, "My son, you have fasted long enough. If the Great Spirit will favor you, he will do it now. It is 7 days since you have tasted food, and you must not sacrifice your life. The Master of Life does not require that." "My father," replied Wunzh, "wait till the sun goes down. I have a particular reason for extending my fast to that hour." "Very well," said the old man. "I shall wait till the hour arise, and you shall be inclined to eat." At his usual hour of appearing, the beautiful sky visitor returned, and the trial of strength was renewed. Although he had not availed himself of his father's offer of food, Wunzh felt that new strength had been given him. His heart was mighty within him to achieve some great purpose. Courage was like the eagle that spreads his wings within the treetop for a great flight, within the bosom of the brave Wunzh. He grasped his angel challenger with supernatural strength, threw him down, and, mindful of his own instructions, tore from him his beautiful garments and plume, and finding him dead, immediately buried him on the spot, using all the precautions he had been told of, and very confident was Wunzh all the time that his friend would again come to life. Wunzh now returned to his father's lodge, where he was warmly welcomed, for as it had been appointed to him during the days of his fasting to walk apart with heaven, he was not permitted to see any human face save that of his father, the representative to the little household upon earth of the good Father who is in heaven. Wunzh partook sparingly of the meal that had been prepared for him, and once more mingled in the cares and sports of the family. But he never for a moment forgot the grave of his friend. He carefully visited it throughout the spring, and weeded out the grass, and kept the ground in a soft and pliant state, and sometimes, when the brave Wunzh thought of his friend that was gone from his sight, he dropped a tear upon the earth where he lay. Watching and tending and moistening the earth with his tears, it was not long before Wunzh saw the tops of green plumes coming through the ground, and the more faithful he was in obeying his instructions, in keeping the ground in order, and in cherishing the memory of his departed friend, the faster they grew. He was, however, careful to conceal the charge of the earth which he had from his father. Days and weeks had passed in this way. The summer was drawing toward a close, when one day, after a long absence in hunting, Wunzh invited his father to follow him to the quiet and lonesome spot of his former fast. The little fasting lodge had been removed, and the weeds kept from growing on the circle where it had stood, but in its place rose a tall and graceful plant, surmounted with nodding plumes and stately leaves and golden clusters. There was in its aspect and bearing the deep green of the summer grass, the clear amber of the summer sky, and the gentle blowing of the summer wind. "It is my friend!" shouted Wunzh. "It is the friend of all mankind! It is Mondawmin! It is our Indian corn! We need no longer rely on hunting alone, for as long as this gift is cherished and taken care of, the ground itself will give us a living." He then pulled an ear. "See, my father," said he, "this is what I fasted for. The Great Spirit has listened to my voice, and sent us something new, and henceforth our people will not alone depend upon the chase or upon the waters." Wunzh then communicated to his father the instructions given to him by the stranger. He told him that the broad husks must be torn away, as he had pulled off the garments in his wrestling, and having done this, he directed him how the ear must be held before the fire till the outer skin became brown, as the complexion of his angel friend had been tinted by the sun, while all the milk was retained in the grain. The whole family, in high spirits, and deeply grateful to the merciful master who gave it, assisted in a feast on the newly grown ears of corn. So came that mighty blessing into the world, and we owe all of those beautiful fields of healthful grain to the dream of the brave boy Wunzh. End of Chapter 10, Part 13.
When Brer Wolf have his corn shucking by Anonymous. Brer Wolf, he make a powerful crop of corn one year, and he turn it over in his mind how he going to get all that corn shucked. Because Brer Wolf mighty unpopular man with his neighbors, and when Brer Wolf have a corn shucking, the creatures don't turn out like they do when Sis Coon have a corn shucking. But Brer Wolf, he have a powerful handsome daughter on the carpet. All the chaps about the county has had their heads set to step up to Brer Wolf's daughter. So Brer Wolf, he send out word how the chap what shucks the most corn at his shucking shall have his handsome daughter. Well, the chaps they come from the far end of Columbia County, and some come from Richmond County, and they set to work, and they make the shucks fly, and each chap have a pile to hisself. Brer Coon, he mighty set on Brer Wolf's daughter, and Brer Coon, he know hisself a powerful likely corn shucker, and Brer Coon, he loathed to hisself how he have a right smart chance to get the girl. Brer Fox, his head done plain turned when Miss Wolf roll her handsome eyes at hisself, and so Brer Fox he get a pile to hisself and fall to work. Now, older Brer Rabbit, his heart set on the girl, but Brer Rabbit he are a mighty poor corn shucker. But Brer Rabbit he just naturally know he don't stand no chance shucking a pile of corn and making time against Brer Coon. So Brer Rabbit he don't waste hisself. Brer Rabbit don't, but he take his hat off and he go up to Brer Wolf and he make his bow and he ask Brer Wolf if he learn his daughter to dance, can he have her? But Brer Wolf he say, what I said. Well, Brer Rabbit he feel terrible put down, but he fall too, and he act most servigerous. He sing, he dance, and he dance, and he sing, and he amuse the company most agreeable like, and he sing before the girls, and he dance before the girls, and he showed them the new step and the new shuffle. Brer Rabbit do. Brer Coon, he just turn his eye on Brer Rabbit occasionally, but he don't pay no attention to his acting and his frolicking. Brer Coon, he just make time with his corn shucking. 12 Brer Coon's pile, it make 3 times the pile of the other chaps. When it come time for Brer Wolf to come round and count his piles, Brer Rabbit he sat down longside Brer Coon and he fall to shucking corn to beat all. When Brer Wolf come round Brer Rabbit, he certainly do make the shucks fly powerful, 'cause the old rascal just been cutting up and acting all the evening, and he ain't tired. When Brer Wolf see the great pile so much bigger than what all the other chaps got, Brer Wolf he say, what for both you chaps shuck on one pile? Brer Coon he low that all his pile. He low, Brer Coon do. How Brer Rabbit been cutting up and frolicking all the evening, and he just now come and sat down longside his pile? Brer Rabbit he say he swear and kiss the book this my pile. Brer Coon he just been frolicking and going on all the evening to beat all. He make us laugh nigh 'bout fit to kill ourselves, while I done work my hands plumb to the bone. Now he set hisself down here and say it his pile. Brer Wolf he say he leave it to the company, but the chaps they don't want Brer Rabbit to have the girl, and they don't want Brer Coon to have the girl, so they won't take sides. They been working so powerful hard, they don't take noticement of Brer Coon or Brer Rabbit. Then Brer Wolf, he leave it to the gals. Now Miss Wolf, she been favoring Brer Rabbit all the evening. Now Miss Wolf, she been favoring Brer Rabbit all the evening. Brer Rabbit dancing and singing plumb turned Miss Wolf's head. So Miss Wolf, she say, it must surely are Brer Rabbit's pile. Miss Wolf, she say, she plumb astonished how Brer Coon can story so. Brer Rabbit, he take the gal and go off home clippity-lippity. Poor old Brer Coon, he take hisself off home. He's so tired he can scarcely hold himself together. End of chapter. Part 14. Recording by Jyoti.
A fine garden. Brer Rabbit, he visit Mr. Man's garden every day to destroy the latest thing in it. 'Twell Mr. Man plumb wore out with old Brer Rabbit, Mr. Man he set a trap for old Brer Rabbit down alongside the big road. One day, when Mr. Man going down the crossroads, he look in his trap, and sure enough, there old Brer Rabbit. Mr. Man he say, "Oh, so old man, here you is. Now I'll have you for my dinner." Mr. Man, he takes a cord from his pocket and tie Brer Rabbit high on a limb of a sweet gum tree, and he leave Brer Rabbit swinging there twell he come back from the crossroads, when he aimed to fotch Brer Rabbit home and cook him for his dinner. Brer Rabbit, he swing this-a-way in the wind and that-a-way, and he swing this-a-way in the wind and that-a-way in the wind, and he think he time done come. Poor old Brer Rabbit don't know where he's at. Presently, here come Brer Wolf loping down the big road. When Brer Wolf see old Brer Rabbit swinging this-a-way and that-a-way in the wind, Brer Wolf he stop short and he say, "For the Lord, man, what you doing up there?" Brer Rabbit he say, "This just my cool air swing. I just taken a swing this morning." But Brer Rabbit he just know Brer Wolf gonna make way with him. Brer Rabbit he just turn it over in his mind which way he gonna get to. The wind it swing poor Brer Rabbit way out this-a-way and way out that-a-way, while Brer Rabbit swinging, he work his brain too. Brer Wolf he say, "Brer Rabbit, I got you fast. Now I gon' eat you up." Brer Rabbit he say, "Brer Wolf, open your mouth and shut your eyes. I'll jump plumb in your mouth." So Brer Wolf turn his head up and shut his eyes. Brer Rabbit he feel in his pocket and take out some pepper, and Brer Rabbit he throw it plumb down Brer Wolf's throat. Brer Wolf he nigh 'bout 'stracted with the misery. He cough and he roll in the dirt, and he get up and he strike out for home, coughin' to beat all. And Brer Rabbit he swing this-a-way and that-a-way in the wind. Presently, here come Brer Squirrel. When Brer Squirrel he see the wind swing Brer Rabbit way out this-a-way and way out that-a-way, Brer Squirrel be that 'stonished he stop short. Brer Squirrel he say, "For the Lord, Brer Rabbit, what you done yourself this here time?" Brer Rabbit he say, "This here my cool swing, Brer Squirrel. I taken a fine swing this morning." And the wind it swing Brer Rabbit way out this-a-way and way back that-a-way. Brer Rabbit he fold his hands and look mighty restful and happy, like he's settin' back fannin' hisself on his front porch. Brer Squirrel he say, "Please, sir, Brer Rabbit, let me try your swing one time." Brer Rabbit he say, "Certainly, Brer Squirrel, you do me proud." And Brer Rabbit he make haste to turn hisself loose. Presently Brer Rabbit he say, "Come up here, Brer Squirrel, and give me a hand with this knot." And Brer Squirrel he make haste to go and turn Brer Rabbit loose, and Brer Rabbit he make Brer Squirrel fast to the cord. The wind it swing Brer Squirrel way out this-a-way and way out that-a-way, and Brer Squirrel he think it fine. Brer Rabbit he say, "I go down to the spring to get a fresh drink. You can swing twell I come back." Brer Squirrel he say, "Take your time, Brer Rabbit, take your time." Brer Rabbit he take his time and scratch out for home fast he can go, and he ain't caring how long Brer Squirrel swing. Brer Squirrel he swing this way and he swing that-a-way, and he think it fine. Presently here come Mr. Man. When Mr. Man he see Brer Squirrel he plumb 'stonished. He say, "Oh, so, old man, I done hear a many of your fine tricks, but I never done hear yourself into a squirrel before. Powerful kind of you, Brer Rabbit, to give me a fine squirrel dinner." Mr. Man he take Brer Squirrel home and cook him for dinner. End of chapter 10, part 15.
Seasons. There was not a prettier cottage on the borders of the forest than that which was the home of Clare and Laura. A beautiful rose tree clambered all over the little house, thrusting its clusters of small pink blossoms through the open windows, and nodding to Clare, as though to say, "You are as sweet as we are, and the sun shines on us all." The roses did not nod their heads at Laura, for she was as ugly and wicked as Clare was lovely. Her face wore always a heavy frown, which her mother's reflected, for Laura was her favourite child, and she could not bear to see that her second daughter, for whom she had no spark of love, should be so much the more attractive of the two. Dame Nature had been very kind to the little Clare. The roses had given their delicate colouring to her soft cheeks, and her pretty eyes were just the hue of a purple pansy. The red of the crimson berries that glinted among the evergreens when winter came was not more vivid than that of her lips, and her hair had the sheen of yellow corn when the sun is smiling on it. Laura could not look at her without a pang of envy, and longed to drive her away from home. One bitter day in winter, when a waste of snow surrounded the cottage, and frozen icicles hung from the roof, Laura asked her mother if Clare might pick some violets in the woods for her. "Violets?" exclaimed the mother. "At this time of the year? Why, you must be dreaming, child. There is not a single flower in all the forest." But Laura insisted that Clare should be sent to seek for the flowers, and loath to refuse her anything, her mother did as she was asked. "Do not come back without them, or it will be the worse for you," Laura called from the doorway, as she watched her little sister go shiveringly down the pathway that led to the forest. In its depths, she knew, there lurked gaunt grey wolves, and these were fierce with hunger. Clare knew this too, and her heart was faint with fear as she passed through the grove of fir trees. A cheery little robin hopped down from one of the branches and sang a few bars of his winter song, as if to comfort her. She had gone but a few paces further when she saw the red of his breast repeated in a glimmer of ruddy light in the distance. She hastened towards it, and found it came from a huge fire, round which were sitting 12 strange men. The faces of all were kindly, but while 3 had long white beards and snowy garments, 3 had golden beards and long green garments. 3 had auburn beards and yellow garments, and yet another triplet with long black beards were dressed in violet. One of the 3, whose hair was frosted, looked up as she approached. "May I warm myself at the fire, kind sir?" she asked him timidly, and making room for her at once, he asked her why she wandered in the forest in such bitter weather. "I was sent to pluck violets for my sister," Clare explained, "and I dare not go home without them, or she would be very angry." At this her questioner turned to one of the 3 men who were robed in purple. "Violets are your concern, Brother May. Cannot you help the poor little thing?" he asked. "She will be frozen to death otherwise, for tonight it will be colder than ever." "To be sure I will," said Brother May, laying a gentle hand on Clare's fair hair, and taking the staff from the white-haired man, he poked the fire. This was the signal for a most marvellous change in the forest. Ice and snow disappeared, and the air became soft and balmy. Birds sang in the branches overhead, and flowers sprang up, as if by magic, round the path which Clare had trodden. She filled her hands with fragrant violets, and thanked the brothers for their help. "You are welcome, dear child," they cried, and the old man took back his staff again, and in his turn poked the fire. Once more it was winter, and Clare hastened home to the cottage as quickly as she could. Both Laura and her mother were surprised to see her, for they had made sure that she would lose her way. Laura snatched at the violets only to toss them aside, and was so unkind for the rest of the day that Clare sobbed herself to sleep. Next morning she was again sent out in the snow. This time it was to seek wild strawberries in the forest, and her sister's look was so full of meaning as she said, "Do not come home without them," that the poor little maiden trembled with fear as well as with cold as she entered the gloomy wood. The same friendly robin fluttered across her path, and following the direction in which he flew, to her great delight she saw again the ruddy glow of the fire. The 12 strange men were still seated round it, and Brother January took her by the hand. "Why are you here again, poor child?" he asked her gently. "It would surely be wiser for you to stay at home while King Frost reigns over the land, for you are young and tender, and his grip is very cruel." "I had to come, sir," Clare explained. "My sister said she must have strawberries. We gathered some in June last year." Brother January turned to a companion dressed in flowing yellow. "Strawberries are your concern, Brother June," he said. "It is for you now to come to the aid of our little friend." "I will do so with pleasure," said Brother June, taking the staff held out to him, and giving the fire a vigorous poke. At this the winter disappeared, the trees sprang into full leaf, and crimson berries were seen amidst the creeping tendrils of the strawberry plant. Clare gathered as much of the sweet fruit as she could carry, and once more thanked her friends with a grateful smile. "You are welcome," they cried in chorus, and as Brother January took back his staff, the winter once more spread its mantle over the earth. Instead of being grateful for the delicious fruit that Clare had brought her, Laura was more vexed than ever to find she had not been eaten by wolves. Her mother, too, looked at the poor girl angrily, and sent her out to the barn, as if she could no longer bear the sight of her. Clare was barely awake next morning when she was told that she must go to the forest and bring home some apples for her sister Laura, who had a fancy for them. "But it's so dark, dear mother," cried Clare in terror. "Make haste and go," was the only answer. And as quickly as her numbed fingers would allow her, Clare finished her simple toilet and started on her way. The robin was still asleep, with his head tucked under his wing, but a tiny wood mouse poked out his head from his nest in the foot of a hollow tree, as he heard her footsteps upon the frozen snow. "If you walk straight on, you will find your friends," he squeaked, and Clare thankfully followed his directions. Before long she was warming herself before the glowing fire, and the brothers were asking, with much sympathy, why she had again been sent to face the cold. "Apples!" cried Brother January, when she had told them. "Ah, it's your concern now, Brother September." Forthwith September poked the fire, and lo and behold! It was cheery autumn, and the ground was strewn with crimson and russet leaves. A tree of wild apples, close beside her, was laden with fruit. Brother September turned to the child with a kindly smile. "Gather 2 of them," he said. Clare picked 2 of the largest and finest, and when she had done so, September handed back his staff to January. He stirred the fire, and ice and snow reappeared. Laura made no effort to disguise her disappointment when Clare brought her the 2 apples. She ate them, however, and finding that their flavor most delicious, commanded her to fetch her hood and cloak. In spite of all that her mother could say to dissuade her, she declared that she would go to the forest and gather some for herself. "I shall find much finer ones than those you brought me, you greedy creature," she said to Clare, as she flounced away, refusing her gentle offer to go with her. The sun shone brightly on the sparkling snow, and she took the same path that her sister had done. The robin glanced at her from his bright dark eyes, but he did not attempt to sing. He was frightened by something he saw in her face. It was the spirit of greed and envy. After wandering about for some time, and to her great disgust, finding nothing whatever in the way of fruit, Laura at last caught sight of the fire, with the 12 little men sitting round. Without a word of greeting, she pushed her way into their midst, and held out her hands towards the glowing embers. "What do you want?" asked Brother January, somewhat nettled by her rude manners. "Nothing from you," she answered roughly, scowling as she spoke. The old man poked the fire in silence, and the sky grew dark. A heavy snowstorm began to fall, and Laura tried in vain to make her way home again, for the great flakes, dropping silently one on another, made the path she had come by impossible to tread. She stumbled at last into a great drift, and soon was buried in its depths. Her mother grew more and more anxious about her as the day wore on, and when afternoon came, set out to seek her in the forest. She also found her way to the glowing fire, and pushing aside Brother January, just as her daughter had done, proceeded to warm her hands. When asked what she wanted, she gave the same rude answer with the same result. The old man poked the fire, and the snow fell swiftly and silently. Very soon she too was buried in a glistening bank, and Clare had neither mother nor sister left. With all their faults, she had loved them fondly, and it would have been lonely for her in the cottage now, if it had not been for her friends of the forest. As each month of the year came round, one paid her a visit, bringing flowers or fruit or glorious crimson leaves. The white-bearded men alone came empty-handed, but these sat with her beside the fire, and told her wonderful stories of winter in many lands. In the course of time she became a good and beautiful woman, and wedded a prince from a distant shore. End of chapter 11, part 1.
The man was handsome and gay of temper, and had never been known to do an unworthy action. In the circle of the court he was the brightest star, and very sweet were the glances thrown him by the high-born ladies who served the Sultan. The prince was courteous to them all, but he favored no one, and as years went on, and he showed no signs of taking to himself a wife, the Sultan became disturbed. "My son," he said, "why do you not choose a bride? It is time you were married, for I should like to see you the father of children before I go to my rest. Surely it would be easy to find a mate amidst these fair women you see around you. I should experience no difficulty were I in your place." The young prince looked at him thoughtfully. "I must have something more than any of them can give me, my father," he replied, "and if you really wish me to take a wife, I will go on a long journey, perhaps even round the world, and seek a princess whom I can love. She must be fair as the morning, white as the snow, and as pure as an angel." "Well said, my son," replied the Sultan. "I wish you good fortune and a safe return." And without more ado the prince departed. The air was crisp with frost, and the glittering crystals of the snow threw back the radiance of the sunlight from bank to meadow. The waves that tossed and tumbled on the distant shore seemed to beckon him towards them, so he hastened to the coast, where he found a splendid vessel resting at anchor. While he was yet wondering how it had come there, and whither it was bound, invisible hands drew him on board, and as his feet touched the deck, the anchor lifted, and the ship set sail. For 3 days and 3 nights it glided swiftly over the sea, steered by a shadowy pilot who spoke no word. On the morning of the 4th day it came to a stop beside a little islet, and the prince was amazed to see his favorite horse issue from the hold, ready saddled and bridled. Concluding that he was expected to land, he led the horse on shore, and when he turned round to take another look at the ship, it had completely vanished. No sign of any habitation was to be seen, and the cold was so intense that he could scarcely hold the reins. In spite of this, he rode on and on, till at last he reached a small white house that stood by itself on the top of a hill, unsheltered from the wind. He knocked at the door with eager haste, hoping for the glimpse of a fire and perhaps some food. His summons was answered by a venerable woman with scanty hair like wisps of snow, who stared at him inquiringly. "I seek a wife, good mother," said the prince. "She must be the most beautiful princess in the world, and as good as she is beautiful. Can you tell me where to find her?" The old woman half shut the door. "You will not find her here," she said, "for I am Winter, and this is my kingdom. My sister Autumn perhaps may help you, but I have no time for thoughts of love. You will find her if you go straight on." The prince thanked the old lady, and remounted his horse, hoping that Autumn would at least give him rest and refreshment. After a while he found that the snow had disappeared, and that luscious fruit now hung in clusters from the trees. The stubble of the corn tinted the fields with gold, and the squirrels were busily engaged in storing nuts for the winter. A little further on he came to a small brown house beside a wood, and, again dismounting, he knocked at the door. It was opened by a woman with abundant dark hair and eyes like sloes. Her cheeks were ruddy, and her look was kind. She did not, however, ask him in. "What are you seeking, young man?" she inquired in a gentle voice. "I seek a wife," he answered briefly. "Ah!" she exclaimed, "then I cannot help you. My name is Autumn, and I am far too busy gathering fruit to have time to spare for such things as love and marriage. My sister Summer is full of dreams, and she may find you what you want." So saying, she shut the door, and as there was nothing else for him to do, the prince resumed his journey. He noticed ere long that the grass by the roadside was very tall, and that the fields were heavy with corn ready for harvest. The air was so warm that it touched his cheek caressingly, and the sun shone down so hotly that he was fain to unloose his coat. He was very glad when at last he saw a small yellow house shaded by a group of trees. As he knocked at the door, he heard the sound of a distant waterfall, and the hope of quenching his thirst was more in his mind just then than the fairest wife in Summer's kingdom. His summons was answered by a stately woman crowned with auburn tresses. "I am sorry I cannot help you," she said, when he had told her the object of his journey, "for I too am very busy. Hasten you to my sister Spring. She is the friend of lovers, and will surely aid you." So the prince went on till he saw a little green house in a bower of lilac, hyacinths and violets, jonquils, narcissi, and fragrant lilies of the valley bloomed beneath the windows, and when he knocked at the door, a little lady with flaxen hair and eyes of soft deep violet appeared on the threshold. "Won't you take pity on me?" he asked her eagerly. "Your sister sent me on to you. I seek a wife who must be fair as the morning, white as the snow, and pure as an angel from heaven." "You ask a great deal," Spring told him smilingly, "but I will do my best for you. Come in and rest. You must be tired and hungry." And to his great delight she ushered him into a long, low room filled with the scent of flowers. When he had feasted on bread and honey, and quenched his thirst with sweet new milk, she brought him 3 fine lemons on a crystal tray. Beside them was a handsome silver knife, and a quaint gold cup of rare design. "These are magic gifts," she said, "so guard them carefully. Return at once to your own home, and make your way to the great fountains in the palace gardens. Having made quite sure that you are alone, take your silver knife and cut open the first lemon. As you do so, a lovely princess will instantly appear, and will ask you to give her water. If you at once offer her some in this golden cup, she will stay with you and be your wife. But should you hesitate, even for the space of a second, she will vanish into thin air, and you will never see her again." "I am not likely to be so foolish," said the prince. "But if I do, shall I have no wife at all?" "You must then cut open the second lemon," Spring answered gravely, "and exactly the same thing will occur. If you hesitate this time also, and she too disappears, you will have one more chance with the third lemon. Should your wits fail you a third time, you will die without a mate." The prince would have thanked her for her kindness, but she waved him away with a smile and a sigh, telling him not to delay. Full of joyful anticipation, he rode once more through the kingdoms of summer, autumn, and winter, and when he arrived at the coast found the same stately vessel awaiting his pleasure. The wind was favorable on his homeward voyage, and in a very short time he had once more gained the precincts of his father's palace. Giving his horse into the care of a groom, he hurried into the great gardens, and when he had filled Spring's gold cup with water from the splashing fountains, cut open the first lemon. He had no sooner done so than a most exquisite princess appeared before him, and with a timid glance asked him to give her water. "I am thirsty," she murmured. "Will you not let me drink from your golden cup?" The prince was so lost in admiration that he could only gaze at her, and with a gesture of reproach the lovely maiden vanished. It was in vain that he lamented his stupidity. Do as he would, he could not call her back again, and with many regrets he cut the rind of the second lemon. Once more the gleaming spray of the dancing fountains took the form of a beautiful girl. "Fair as the morning and white as snow!" cried the prince in rapture, too delighted to heed her request for a cup of water. He did not regain his senses until she also had disappeared, when he again bewailed his neglect of Spring's injunctions. With trembling fingers he inserted the silver knife into the third lemon, and as the pungent odor of the golden fruit escaped into the air, another princess appeared before him. Closing his eyes, lest they might be dazzled by her exceeding beauty, he immediately offered the golden cup. The maiden raised it to her lips with a bewitching smile, and drained it to its dregs. The prince laughed aloud for joy. Now at last he had found the bride he sought. No summer morning was fairer than she, for the whiteness of snow gleamed on chin and brow, and her expression was pure and gentle as an angel's. Drawing her down beside him onto a flowery bank, he held her hand and looked into her eyes. "Will you be my wife?" he whispered, and to his delight she answered, "Yes." When his first raptures were over, he noticed with some disappointment the simplicity of his bride's gown. It was of some simple stuff, the color of running water, and hung in long flowing folds round her lissom form. No necklace broke the outline of her dainty throat, and she looked so different from the maidens of the court that the prince, who, after all, was only a man, and not, perhaps, a very wise one, felt that something was lacking to complete her beauty. "Your robe is not worthy of you, dear love," he cried. "If you wait for me here, I will fetch you one of rich white satin from my father's palace, and a rope of pearls to twine around your neck." But the princess knew that she needed no ornaments to enhance her beauty, and she did not wish him to leave her. Her lover, however, was so insistent that she consented to stay by the fountains while he went home, and, more in love with her than ever, he hurried away. Now the princess was very timid, and as the prince tarried long she grew frightened of being alone. So she stretched out her arms to a tree above her, and she swung herself up that she might nestle amidst its branches. The foliage hid her slender limbs in their flowing draperies, but her exquisite face gleamed like a flower from a setting of glossy leaves, and was mirrored in the deep basin of the fountains. An ugly negress, who came to fill her pitcher, caught sight of its loveliness, and, since she had never gazed into a mirror, believed it to be her own. "Oh, how very handsome I am!" she murmured. "I am far too beautiful to do the bidding of any mistress. I will never draw water again." And, flinging the pitcher from her, she strutted home with the air of a peacock. "Why have you come back empty-handed, Deborah?" inquired her mistress. "I have seen my face in the fountain," was the reply, "and I am much too lovely to fetch and carry like a poor slave." "Why, you are as ugly as sin," her mistress retorted sharply. "Go back at once, and do as you are told." Deborah fetched another pitcher and went back to the fountains, grumbling the while. Again she caught sight of the princess' face reflected in the water, and again her swarthy features became distorted with pride. "It is true," she cried. "I am lovely as a dream. I will marry a prince and live in a palace." With this she threw down the second pitcher, and flounced into her mistress' presence with such an assumption of dignity that the lady burst out laughing. "If you only knew how ugly you are," she cried, when she could speak, "you would never talk such ridiculous nonsense." And daring her to return again without the water, she handed the mortified woman a third pitcher, and sent her back to the fountain. The flower-like face of the fair princess smiled back at the angry negress as she bent over the pool, and the poor creature grinned and ogled. "But I am handsome," she cried triumphantly, "as handsome as a queen." She spoke so loudly that the princess heard her, and her laugh rang out like a peal of bells. Looking hastily up, the negress saw her in the branches, and disappointed vanity rendered her almost speechless. Her mistress was right then, after all, and the lovely vision she had seen in the water was not a reflection of herself. As she stared upwards with dilated eyes, there came to her thoughts of revenge. "I will make her suffer for this," she murmured. but wreathing her white lips in a false smile, she bade the princess, "Good morrow! Why do you hide in a tree, lovely lady?" she asked her gently. "I am waiting for my prince, who has gone to fetch me a sateen robe and a rope of pearls to twine round my neck," answered the princess shyly. "Your golden hair has been tossed by the wind," remarked the negress. "Let me come up beside you, and I will make it smooth. It will not do to look untidy when your prince arrives." "How kind you are," said the princess, and as she bent her silken head towards the negress, the treacherous woman stabbed it with a long sharp pin. The princess fell back, faint with pain, but before her body could touch the ground she turned into a snow-white pigeon, and flew off uttering plaintive cries. The negress took her place in the tree, and when at last the prince appeared, bearing a sateen robe and a bridal veil, it was she whom he saw looking down on him. "Where is my sweet princess?" he asked. "She is fair as the morning, and white as snow. What have you done with her?" "Alas, dear prince," answered the negress sadly, "while you were away an enchantress came and changed me into my present form. When you have proved your love by making me your wife, I shall, in 3 days' time, once more become a fair and beautiful princess. But if you desert me, I must remain forever hideous." Although the sight of her filled him with repulsion, the prince was a man of honor, and would not break his word. Calling the ladies who were waiting in the carriage which he had brought to convey his bride to the palace, he bade them array her in the sateen gown, and, pretending not to see their astonishment and disgust, drove back with her to his father, introducing her as his promised wife. The Sultan was naturally horrified at her appearance, but when the prince explained to him how matters stood, he agreed that he must marry her and hope for the best. While the father and son talked thus together, the negress wandered over the palace, giving unnecessary orders to the servants, and making herself hateful to all. She even ventured into the great kitchens, and commanded the chief cook to prepare rich viands for her wedding ceremonies. As she issued her orders in a loud, harsh voice, she passed by the window and noticed a slim white pigeon sitting on the sill. "Kill me that bird," she cried, "and cook it for my supper." Not daring to disobey her, the chief cook killed it immediately, plunging a sharp knife into its snowy breast. 3 drops of blood fell from the window-sill into the courtyard, and a tiny seedling sprang from each of these. As if a fairy had waved her wand, they grew into trees of fragrant blossom, and in less time than it takes to tell, the blossoms turned into golden lemons. Meanwhile the prince was seeking for his bride, for since he had set himself so distasteful a task, he wished to perform it well. "She is in the kitchen, your royal highness," he was informed by one of his shocked courtiers, and in going to meet her the prince passed under the lemon trees. The sight of their fruit brought him a ray of hope, and gathering 3 of the finest that he could find, he hastened with them to his own room, where, having filled the golden cup with water, he plunged the blade of the silver knife into the rind of the first lemon. As before, a beautiful girl appeared, and stretched out her fair hands for the golden cup. "Ah, no!" he cried. "You are very charming, but you are not my princess." He cut the rind of a second lemon, and as he did so the second princess took form before him. He shook his head at her mute entreaty for a cup of water, and she too disappeared. Then he cut the rind of the third lemon, and lo! his own princess was once more in his arms. Great was the joy and relief of the old Sultan when he heard from the prince that this beautiful girl was his real bride. But he listened with a frown of anger as she told them all that had happened when her lover left her by the fountain. He ordered the negress to be immediately brought before him, and, regarding her very sternly, asked her what she would think a fitting punishment for an affront offered to the future wife of his dear son. "Nothing less than death," declared the negress, "and death by burning. Let the offender be cast into your Majesty's oven, and the great door shut." "Madam, you have passed sentence on yourself," replied the Sultan dryly, and, shrieking with terror, the negress was led away. But the sweet princess would not let her suffer. "She is but a poor ignorant woman," she said, "and it must be sad to be so ugly. Set her free, I entreat you, and let her go. This is the boon I ask you for my wedding gift." The Sultan could not refuse his new daughter's first request, and the prince regarded her fondly. "I saw you were fair as morning and white as snow," he murmured, "and now I know that you are as sweet as an angel." And though the years to come brought him trouble and sorrow as well as joy, he was indeed blessed. Beloved of all, his princess wielded a gentle sway, and he never saw the fruit of a lemon without sending a grateful thought to spring for the magic gifts by which she had fared so well.
End of chapter 11, part 2.
Spirit and His Visitor by Cornelius Matthews. An old man was sitting alone in his lodge by the side of a frozen stream. It was the close of winter, and his fire was almost out. He appeared very old and very desolate. His locks were white with age, and he trembled in every joint. Day after day passed in solitude, and he heard nothing but the sounds of the tempest, sweeping before it the new fallen snow. One day, as his fire was just dying, a handsome young man approached and entered his dwelling. His cheeks were red with the blood of youth, his eyes sparkled with life, and a smile played upon his lips. He walked with a light and quick step. His forehead was bound with a wreath of sweet grass in place of the warrior's frontlet, and he carried a bunch of flowers in his hand.
"Ah, my son," said the old man, "I am happy to see you. Come in, come, tell me of your adventures and what strange lands you have been to see. Let us pass the night together. I will tell you of my prowess and exploits, and what I can perform. You shall do the same, and we will amuse ourselves."
He then drew from his sack a curiously wrought antique pipe, and having filled it with tobacco, rendered mild by an admixture of certain dried leaves, he handed it to his guest. When the ceremony was attended to, they began to speak.
"I blow my breath," said the old man, "and the streams stand still. The water becomes stiff and hard as clear stone."
"I breathe," said the young man, "and flowers spring up all over the plains."
"I shake my locks,"
retorted the old man,
"and snow covers the land. The leaves fall from the trees at my command, and my breath blows them away. The birds rise from the water and fly to a distant land. The animals hide themselves from the glance of my eye, and the very ground where I walk becomes as hard as flint."
"I shake my ringlets," rejoined the young man, "and warm showers of soft rain fall upon the earth. The plants lift up their heads out of the ground like the eyes of children glistening with delight. My voice recalls the birds, the warmth of my breath unlocks the streams. Music fills the groves wherever I walk, and all nature welcomes my approach." At length The sun began to rise. A gentle warmth came over the place. The tongue of the old man became silent. The robin and the bluebird began to sing on the top of the lodge. The stream began to murmur by the door, and the fragrance of growing herbs and flowers came softly on the vernal breeze. Daylight fully revealed to the young man the character of his entertainer. When he looked upon him, he had the visage of Peebuan, the icy old winter spirit. Streams began to flow from his eyes. As the sun increased, he grew less and less in stature, and presently he had melted completely away. Nothing remained on the place of his lodge fire but the miscodeed, a small white flower with a pink border, which the young visitor, Sigwin, the spirit of spring, placed in the wreath upon his brow, as his first trophy in the north. End of Chapter 11, Part 3. Recorded by Ali Medved on June 15th, 2018. End of Junior Classics, Volume 2, Folktales and Myths, by William Patton.